BRICS De-dollarization campaign has been steadily growing momentum, so much so that the authorities in the US are beginning to get worried. And as a result, the incoming President Donald Trump just issued a threat to BRICS nations. For President Trump to threaten BRICS means that he realized that BRICS has the potential of crippling the US dollar and the US economy. While most BRICS nations have not responded, Russia has recently responded to Trump's threat. The question is Trump's threat enough to stop the de-dollarization campaign? Let's find out. The US incoming President Donald Trump has not yet assumed office, but he already has a new target: BRICS. When it was founded in 2009, the US and the West in general didn't give BRICS any attention. For them, BRICS was a loose group made up of countries that had issues. However, in recent times, things have begun to change. BRICS has grown steadily from how it started to become a bloc that controls 40% of the world's GDP and population. But that's not all. BRICS has also grown to become a reputable bloc with the potential of crippling the hegemony of the United States. With its de-dollarization campaign, which focuses on using local currencies instead of the dollar for international trade, BRICS has the potential to unseat the dollar. Right now, the US realizes this, and typical of the United States, President Trump responded with a threat. Following the 16th BRICS summit in October, where Russian President Vladimir Putin accused the US of weaponizing the dollar and described it as a big mistake, Trump responded recently to this statement. In a post on his X page on December 1, 2024, Trump demanded that BRICS halt its plan of dumping the dollar in global trade. He said, "The idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America." So, Trump says that any country that attempts to stop using the dollar for trade will be faced with 100% tariffs. This means that any country exploring its goods to the US will be hit with a 100% tariff. But isn't this the same tactic that made BRICS launch the de-dollarization campaign in the first place? Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Now, while most of the BRICS nations have not responded, Russia has responded by saying that Trump's threat will simply accelerate the dollar's decline. According to Dmitry Peskov, Russia's spokesperson, if the United States use force, as they say, economic influence of some kind to make other countries use the dollar, it will probably further strengthen the tendencies to use national currencies. The dollar is beginning to lose its attractiveness for a number of countries. If you think about it, it's true. The US has always used threats and sanctions to make countries do its bidding, and that is what BRICS is fighting against. So the fact that Trump is using the same tactic to try and persuade countries not to ditch the dollar will simply convince these countries to forge ahead. Now, according to Trump's allies, President Trump is not really serious about the tariffs. He is simply using it as leverage to gain the upper hand during negotiations. Trump's allies point to Canada, which Trump threatened with a 25% tariff. And a few days later, the Prime Minister of Canada flew down to Florida where he met with Donald Trump. So they say that Trump is trying to use the threat of the 100% tariff to convince BRICS nations to ditch the de-dollarization campaign. The question is, will Trump's threat work? Well, firstly, unlike Canada, BRICS makes up 40% of the world's global population, 37% of global GDP, and 23% of global trade. This means that they actually have more leverage. In addition to this, the leaders of BRICS member countries, including Russia, China, and South Africa, are not leaders that easily respond to threats. Recall that South Africa once took Israel, an ally of the US, to the ICJ despite facing the threat of a possible expulsion from the US AGOA initiative. Russia has been subjected to several sanctions by the US and yet has refused to give in to the demands of the US. The same goes for China. So why President Trump would think that threatening these countries would do anything is beyond us. Secondly, Trump's threat is flawed. Trump thinks that imposing a 100% tariff will only affect countries exporting their goods to America. But the truth is, it will also affect American consumers because they will have to pay more for the same goods. Perhaps this is why most analysts think that it is just bluster. Besides this, BRICS nations can decide not to export their goods to America. Yes, America has a huge consumer market, but it is not up to the BRICS nations combined. In other words, it is America that will suffer for it. Interestingly, this is not the first time that Trump has threatened to impose a 100% tariff on BRICS nations. Trump first raised this issue during his presidential campaign speech in April this year. He said that if he won the election, he would not allow other countries to abandon the dollar. In his own words, "I hate it when countries abandon the dollar. I will not allow countries to abandon the dollar. If we lose this standard, it will be like losing the War of Independence, and it will be a blow to our country, just like losing a war. And we cannot allow that. Right now, many countries are having a hard time abandoning the dollar." The fact that President Trump included this in his election pledges means that the dollar abandonment issue is a big deal for the US. But April wasn't the only time President Trump repeated his promise. He said the same thing again recently, but this time it wasn't just a promise to stop countries from abandoning the dollar. No, this time he stated how he wants to stop countries from abandoning the dollar. Just like he recently stated, President Trump announced that he will use America's favorite weapons, threats and sanctions. "We will not waste the dollar," he said at a rally in Wisconsin. In his address to the participants, the US presidential candidate issued a strong warning to all countries considering abandoning the dollar in international trade. In his speech, President Trump promised to impose 100% tariffs on any country that dares to turn its back on the dollar and to impose sanctions on those countries, a move that strengthens his protectionist trade plan. This will no longer be an important issue if the US starts using threats and sanctions. President Trump also emphasized that abandoning the US dollar in international trade essentially means losing access to the US market. Simply put, when a country abandons the dollar, it becomes economically impossible for that country to trade with the US. According to President Trump, this move or tactic is simply to protect the US dollar, which he says has been under attack in recent years. Furthermore, he expressed concern over the growing discussions among BRICS alliance members, including China and Russia, to reduce their reliance on the dollar and conduct bilateral trade in currencies other than the dollar. President Trump recalled last year's BRICS summit, which made a major advance in the de-dollarization policy, and reiterated his desire and determination to ensure that the dollar remains the world's dominant reserve currency. Yes, the US dollar is still the world's reserve currency, accounting for almost 60% of world trade. But in reality, the value of the dollar has fallen in recent years, and the BRICS De-dollarization campaign has opened the eyes of many countries, showing them that there are alternatives to the dollar in trade. While the use of the dollar in international trade and as a reserve currency is beneficial for the United States, it is a big problem for countries that use the dollar. In some countries, especially developing countries such as African countries, the use of the dollar in trade has led to the devaluation of their currencies, which has affected their economies. Furthermore, the use of the dollar as a reserve currency means that countries around the world that are not allies of the United States or do not agree with the US position on any issue are at risk of being subject to financial and economic sanctions at any time. Since the US became the world superpower in all fields including economy, it is no longer news and no longer a concession that the US uses economic sanctions as a weapon and political tool to strangle countries that it perceives as threats and violates its sanctions, ideals, and principles. Many countries, including China, Russia, Iran, and several African countries, are subject to US sanctions. Russia is currently one of the countries most affected by the brutal US sanctions. In essence, the US has become a global tyrant that uses threats and sanctions to get what it wants. Remember when South Africa put Israel on trial for genocide earlier this year? While the entire legal process was still ongoing, the US Congress was threatening to expel South Africa from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which grants African countries duty-free access to the US market, for daring to take its ally Israel to court. Given this situation, It is natural that countries around the world are looking for alternatives to the US dollar in international trade, not only to protect their own currencies, but also to eliminate the risk of sanctions. But typical of America, instead of looking for other ways to stop countries from abandoning the US dollar, President Trump thinks that threatening countries is the perfect way. Honestly, it's just stupid. How can we stop these countries from abandoning the dollar by using the same tactics that got them to abandon the dollar in the first place? This makes no sense, but I think the only options the United States can think of to solve this problem are threats, sanctions, and war. Interestingly, we are not the only ones who think that threatening these countries is a smart idea. Some analysts, including Ulrich Leuchtmann, head of foreign exchange research at Commerce Bank, have warned about the potential impact of President Trump's hardline approach on tariffs. Ulrich says that President Trump's tariff proposals could actually backfire and cause even more countries to abandon the dollar, causing significant disruption to global markets. This could actually weaken the dollar's dominant position and trigger a devaluation of currencies. If you think about it, these analysts are right. Do you think the threat of a 100% tariff will deter China or Russia from their de-dollarization campaigns? Of course not. Sure, a 100% tariff might change the minds of countries that need access to the US market for trade, but at the same time, it will make them realize that the US is a bully, and that alone is not enough to stop trade. Stop trading with the dollar. Think about it. The US is big, and that's fine, and it has a big market base, but with a 100% tariff imposed, countries might decide to look for another market. For example, Africa has a very large market base, even larger than the US. Asia is there too. So there is no real danger of imposing 100% tariffs, and the US would suffer from this protectionist policy. Moreover, Donald Trump seems to forget that there are always alternatives. For example, the new BRICS payment system was created as an alternative to SWIFT after Russia was excluded from SWIFT. According to Russia, BRICS Pay has been under consideration for quite some time. In fact, since 2019, BRICS countries have been working on establishing a unified payment system as part of a small value payment and remittance platform for member states. And at the 12th BRICS Summit the following year, BRICS praised the continued efforts towards cooperation between national payment systems, especially the establishment of the BRICS Payments Task Force, and looked forward to further progress on this path. According to the BRICS Pay website, to realize the BRICS Pay project, technology, finance, law, and consulting companies have joined forces to form the BRICS Pay Consortium, which will operate on the principle of decentralized autonomous organization. The new payment system is still under development, but the demo version shown at the BRICS Business Summit shows how good the system is. At the summit, participants were given BRICS Pay cards with 500 rubles preloaded, which can be used at certain stores with the BRICS logo. The demonstration not only tested the new system, but also served to convey to the world that BRICS has reached a new level where it can challenge the current Western-led financial system. The aim of the new system is to enable faster and cheaper foreign trade transactions without outside interference. Chinese experts noted that the initiative will provide BRICS countries with more payment options for goods and services transactions, further strengthening economic relations. In addition, this approach will help reduce overdependence on the US dollar, offset the dollar's dominance, promote financial diversification, and strengthen the economic autonomy of BRICS member states and beyond. Observers of current trends also point out that the new payment system, BRICS Pay, is emerging at a time when countries, especially developing ones, are trying to better safeguard their economic sovereignty while expanding cooperation. Professor Song Wei of the School of International Relations and Diplomacy at Beijing Foreign Studies University said, "The importance of introducing such a payment system in BRICS as a group of emerging economies is obvious. This has practical implications in maintaining China's economic sovereignty." But the question is, why do we need BRICS Pay? BRICS member states and countries of the Global South have lived in a world financial system that is primarily controlled by Western countries. Not only is this system controlled by the West, but it is also biased in favor of the West. This system, combined with the dominance of the US dollar in global trade, has further exacerbated the situation and made many countries vulnerable to the vagaries of geopolitical tensions. Russia, for example, has been hit with countless economic sanctions from Western countries after the annexation of Crimea in 2014. The latest sanctions were imposed in 2022, when the Russian-Ukrainian conflict began. These sanctions are even tougher and appear to have completely cut Russia off from the global financial system. The sanctions have also limited Russia's access to international markets and crippled its economy. Countries other than Russia are also affected by Western sanctions for various reasons. For this reason, BRICS began exploring other options and alternatives to the traditional Western-led system. They realized that the economic sovereignty of the country and its member states depended on developing an independent payment system that would allow cross-border transactions without relying on the dollar. Now, while it's not clear whether Trump would go ahead with his 100% tariff threat, what is clear is the fact that Trump would most likely make it hard for BRICS nations to achieve their goal. But the only way Trump can do this is not through threats or sanctions, but by dealing with the root cause of de-dollarization. It will be interesting to see how it all plays out in the next few years. Will Trump be able to stop the de-dollarization momentum? What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video.